We've all seen it across our leagues. I'm sure you guys have been in leagues where there's somebody that drafts 3 kickers or drafts 4 tight ends, even though they took Travis Kelce in the first round. Today, we're going to be breaking down 6 rookie fantasy football mistakes that you want to let your buffoon league mates make, and you do not want to make those exact mistakes, and I'll tell you how to avoid them in this video. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. Mistake number 1 is drafting a second quarterback or a third quarterback or tight end if you've already spent up in that position. So in the intro, I kind of used the example of the buffoon league mate that drafts like 4 tight ends, even though they took Travis Kelce. This one is so rampant in home leagues that I think it is one of the most exploitable edges that you guys can get if you're in a casual fantasy setting where people have no idea what they're doing. I definitely understand where this idea comes from. People see, 15 bench spots and they want to evenly allocate their bench to every position. But you got to think about it this way. You have 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, a couple flex spot options for a reason. And in most traditional ESPN sleeper leagues, you only have 1 quarterback and 1 tight end. So on the screen right now, you guys can see the top 9 quarterbacks in ADP and the top 7 tight ends in ADP, according to Underdog Fantasy. In my opinion, these guys are all going at the top 7 rounds of the draft for a reason. They're the guys that have the elite upside. If you spend a draft pick on one of these 9 quarterbacks or one of these 7 tight ends, you do not need a second option at that position. Let's say you draft Jalen Hurts in round 3, right? You pick first overall, you take Justin Jefferson. In the second round, you take Jalen Waddle. And in the third round, you take Jalen Hurts. When you take Jalen Hurts, you are inherently making a bet that Jalen Hurts becomes a positional advantage by spending premium draft capital, a third-round pick on a quarterback. By drafting Russell Wilson or Geno Smith or whoever later on in your drafts to quote-unquote back up your Jalen Hurts pick, all you are doing is wasting a bench spot or assuming that the pick that you made on Jalen Hurts is not going to go well. It's going to go poorly. Jalen Hurts is going to bust. He's going to get injured. That is the assumption that you're making when you draft a second quarterback if you spend a premium pick on Jalen Hurts. Newsflash, if you spend a pick on Jalen Hurts in the third round and he busts or it goes poorly in any way, there's a good chance you're not going to win your league anyway. There's a good chance that you're going to have an uphill battle to climb your league's rankings. If he does miss time, if he does bust, you can always stream the waiver wire. You can always trade for another quarterback. When Jalen Hurts has his bye week, you worry about it in that week. When Jalen Hurts is on bye, you go out to your waiver wire and you pick up another quarterback. You do not draft a second quarterback to hold for 10 weeks on your roster to cover your quarterback's week 10 bye. It's total nonsense, and I see a bunch of new fantasy players make this mistake. Just pick up a quarterback in week 10 when you actually have to deal with that problem. The only time that you should ever spend a second pick on a quarterback or a tight end is if you've drafted your first one late. So let's say you miss out on the elite quarterbacks that I talked about, those top 9 quarterbacks, and you take Kirk Cousins in round 9 or round 10. I am okay knowing that I have a stable option in Kirk Cousins by taking a shot on Anthony Richardson as my second quarterback or taking a shot on Kyler Murray as my second quarterback to get a better upside swing at that position. But if you spend an early pick on a quarterback or a tight end, for the most part, that's your guy, and you do not want to draft another option at that position. So mistake number 2 is hammering running backs in the RB dead zone. And we talked a lot about the RB dead zone in our strategy videos, so I'll keep this brief. But if you haven't seen them, check out the Hero, Zero, Double Hero, and my best draft strategy for 2023 drafts. The RB dead zone refers to rounds 4 to 7 of drafts where running back hit rates are poor. The types of running backs that are going in the RB dead zone may vary league to league. If you're in a casual league, you might see, a lot of running backs be pushed up the board. If you're in a more sharper league, the general rule of thumb that I would say applies this year is once Najee Harris and Joe Mixon are off the board, you are in the RB dead zone. Those are the first guys that I archetype as dead zone running backs. So if they come off the board in round 2 in your league, then you definitely want to avoid running backs at this area of the draft. If they come off the board in round 5 of your league might be a little bit sharper, and you can probably stand to actually take some value at running back. But in the running back dead zone, which is generally rounds 4 to 7, the running back hit rate is about 1 of every 3 running backs, which is terrible. That's not what you want. 33% of running backs hit. 66% of those running backs are misses. Wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends, all well over 40% in that area of the draft, which means in that area of the draft, you should be drafting a lot of wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. It's the law of averages, right? The NFL does not produce 25 RB1 caliber running backs for fantasy every year, and every team does not have a workhorse running back No, there's usually 5 to 10 running backs across the league that are well head and shoulders above the remainder of the NFL, and then the rest of the NFL teams run a running back by committee of some point. Do not chase, especially volume plays, especially in the dead zone. Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Miles Sanders are good examples this year. Not only do running backs miss nearly 2/3 of the time in the running back dead zone, they also don't hit at a higher rate than running backs going in the later rounds. So if you're wondering, oh, I only have one running back on my roster, I need to draft some running backs rounds 5, 6, and 7 to make up at that position. The reason that we're not going to do that is because round 8+, round 10+ in the draft, the running backs actually hit at a higher rate than they do in the dead zone. 44% of the time from picks 100 on, so rounds 10+ of your draft, you're getting a hit rate at running back nearly half the time that is above your expected hit rate. The rate in the dead zone, like I said, is 1 in every 3 running backs. So the moral of the story is bypass the running back dead zone rounds 4 to 7 and take 3 to 4 shots in the late portion of your draft and avoid that running back dead zone. Statistically, it's proven to be the better area of the draft to draft running backs because you're leaning into the unknown factor of a bunch of rookie running backs, ambiguous backfields, maybe some handcuffs, maybe some pass catchers. And the running backs in this area of the draft also hit big, greater than a 10% win rate at a better portion than the dead zone as well. So 25% of the time in those late rounds, you were getting a running back that hit big. Only 18% of the time were you getting that in the dead zone, even accounting for the fact that guys like Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders were good picks last year. So if you're a new fantasy player and you're nervous because you only have one running back or 2 running backs or maybe even 0 running backs through the first 4 to 5 rounds because you've been taking the value at wide receiver, quarterback, or tight end, don't panic and start drafting a bunch of running backs in a row. It's the biggest mistake you can make. In those draft strategy videos, we broke that down. Take the best player available always. And if that means you only draft one running back through 8 rounds, congrats. You've just executed a hero RB to perfection, and you can find RB2 production late in your drafts and on the waiver wire once the season begins. So that is the running back dead zone in a nutshell. Mistake number 3, poor bench construction. So when you guys are spending late round picks, make sure you are spending late round picks on high upside options. And this goes hand in hand with mistake number 1, because drafting a second quarterback or a second tight end, if you've already invested in one early, is a perfect example of constructing your bench poorly, because that is probably going to burn a bench spot for you. You're going to hold the second quarterback all the way until your bye week. That's poor bench construction 101. But there is definitely a right and a wrong way to construct your bench. In traditional home leagues, keep this in mind. This is the number 1 principle you want to keep in mind when it comes to your bench. There is absolutely 0 penalty for missing on late round draft picks in fantasy drafts in home leagues. In best ball, it's a little bit different because you have guys that can give you spike weeks like Devontae Parker, DJ Chark, Darius Slayton. Those guys have roles in their offense and can provide you spike weeks. But in home leagues, you do not want to roster players like that. Middling wide receiver 3s, middling wide receiver 4 options, guys that maybe are the number 1 receiver for bad teams, but they're not overly consistent from a fantasy perspective. If you miss on every single pick from rounds 9 to 15, there's 0 penalty in a home league. All you have to do is drop those players and pick up new players. That's exactly how fantasy football works on Sleeper, on ESPN, on Yahoo, and I'm sure a lot of you guys listening to this video are playing on those platforms. You want to spend your late round picks on high upside options, because if they miss, we just cut bait with them and move on and churn the waiver wire. So let's say you're in round 9 right now. You've drafted 2 running backs, you've drafted 4 wide receivers, you have an elite tight end with Mark Andrews, you have an elite quarterback with Lamar Jackson. You're now free to swing for upside at any position because you have your foundation set. As I broke down in mistake number 2, running backs hit at nearly a 44% rate after round 10. So, and they hit big at a rate of 25%. So what you want to do in the late rounds, even if you're stacked at running back, even if you're weak at running back, is take shots on handcuffs like Jaylen Warren. Take shots on rookies like Tank Bigsby or Kendre Miller or Roshan Johnson or Chase Brown. Draft players from backfields where you don't really know what's exactly going to happen, like Jamal Williams with the Saints this year, Antonio Gibson with the Commanders this year. If you draft wide receivers late on in the draft, 6 of the last 15 late round big-time hits since 2020 have been rookie wide receivers. Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Amon-Ra St. Brown. In their rookie seasons, they were big-time hits. So if you're going to deviate away from smashing running backs in the late rounds, you probably want to take shots on rookie wide receivers, rookie tight ends, potentially rookie quarterbacks, or high upside options like a Kyler Murray who's dealing with an injury right now. That is how you want to construct your bench. You do not want to draft a bunch of guys like Devontae Parker and Darius Slayton and DJ Chark and Adam Thielen who have absolutely no upside. They're just going to end up being like low-end flex plays. And at the very worst case scenario, if you need some depth for your roster, you can always pick players like that up off the waiver wire and plug them into your lineup if need be. Do not line your bench with players like that. Line your bench with upside. There's no penalty for those players missing. So mistake number 4 is not correlating your bets. And basically what this essentially means is correlating the picks that you make and the decisions that you make during your fantasy football draft. So if you draft, let's say at pick number 10, you're going to draft CeeDee Lamb because you think CeeDee Lamb is going to smash. He's going to have a monster season. And inherently, when you make that draft pick on CeeDee Lamb, you are betting on CeeDee Lamb, right? You are expecting him to perform at a high level. By making that pick, you have now just taken a stance. Every pick you make is a stance that not only the players that you pick are going to hit, but also the players that you pass on are going to miss. So let's say you take CeeDee Lamb at number 10, you pass on Bijan Robinson, even though Bijan Robinson in our rankings and in ADP is a higher rated player. Correlating the number of things that you need to get right is how you win fantasy leagues. Minimizing the total number of stances that you're taking means that you only need to be right about a couple things so that you can win your league. So your thought process on the clock when you take CeeDee Lamb 10th overall is, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb, he's going to smash, and I don't believe in Bijan Robinson, therefore I'm passing on him. Maybe you think that Bijan Robinson is going to have Tyler Algier work into his workload a little bit more. I don't, but let's say that's your stance. To correlate that bet, it would stand to reason that if CeeDee Lamb crushes, Dak Prescott probably also did well. So one way of correlating the bet you made on CeeDee Lamb is by stacking him. So if you draft a quarterback early, take a pass catcher later on. If you draft a pass catcher like CeeDee Lamb early, maybe stack him up with his quarterback later on. That's the easiest way to correlate your bet, but also because you passed on Bijan Robinson, another way to correlate the bet that you made by passing on him is to draft Tyler Algier later, because in your thesis and the reason you passed on him was because you believed that Tyler Algier would be more inclined to take away some work. So by taking CeeDee Lamb and then taking Dak Prescott and then also taking Tyler Algier later on in your draft, that one decision that you made in round 1 could be right for 3 different reasons and really, really elevate your win rate. So last year, I'll show you how this could have played out. If you had drafted A.J. Brown over Deebo Samuel, right? Let's say you didn't believe in Deebo Samuel. You thought the Eagles offense was going to smash this year. You really believed in A.J. Brown. Then, of course, after taking A.J. Brown, you stack him up in round 5, round 6 with Jalen Hurts, right? So that is the easy way to correlate that bet. Take A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. That boosted your win rate from 16.3% on A.J. Brown, who obviously was a great pick last year, to 25% from hitting on the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts stack. Now let's say you correlated the decision to pass on Deebo Samuel by drafting George Kittle, right? Maybe the reason you passed on Deebo Samuel was because you thought Kittle and Ayuk would be more involved in the offense. They were going to spread the ball out a little bit more. There was too many mouths to feed. Boom. Your win rate just skyrocketed from 16.3% on that one bet you made on A.J. Brown to 25% if you stack him up with Jalen Hurts, all the way up to 60% if you drafted George Kittle as well. With all 3 of those options, you hit at an absurd 100% rate to make the playoffs. If you drafted those 3 players last year, you would have made the playoffs guaranteed 100% according to this data that we have here. So that is the power of correlating your bets. All you need to do is be right on one thing. You don't think Deebo Samuel's a good pick. You think A.J. Brown's a better pick. You take A.J. Brown, you stack him up with Jalen Hurts, and you draft George Kittle to bet against passing on Deebo Samuel. That is how you can properly correlate your bets. So keep that in mind. When you make picks, what types of ways can you correlate those bets if they hit? Because when you make that selection, you are inherently making the bet that you are going to be right on that pick. Simply by stacking is the easiest way to do it, but also betting against the players that you passed on in favor of the player that you took. So mistake number 5 is the double condom play of drafting your own handcuff. And a lot of people, I talked about this in my best draft strategy video, and people got all upset because I said I'm not going to draft Tyler Algier even though I have Bijan Robinson, because in my opinion, drafting your own handcuff is a loser's mentality. If you draft an early round running back like I did in that video with Bijan Robinson with a known handcuff, right? I think it's pretty common knowledge that Tyler Algier is Bijan Robinson's handcuff, the same way it is that Elijah Mitchell is Christian McCaffrey's handcuff, and so on and so forth. I understand the temptation of drafting your handcuff. I really do. Protecting yourself against injury by drafting Elijah Mitchell in case Christian McCaffrey goes down for 4 games. You can make up that production while CMC is out and not really lose any steps in your starting lineup. But keep this in mind. It is difficult to win a fantasy football league. It is not easy. It's a 1 in 12 chance, right? If you're in a 12-man league or a 10-man league, it's a 1 in 12, 1 in 10 chance, 1 in 14, 1 in 16 chance inherently. As I just talked about, by drafting CMC or by drafting Bijan Robinson or by drafting any early round running back, you are making the bet, the assumption that that guy will hit. So you need to draft as if you are right, even though you might not be, right? We don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict the future. We don't know who's going to get injured. But when we make that pick, we are inherently making the bet that it's going to go well. Because if it doesn't go well, you're probably not going to win your league anyway. If Bijan Robinson blew his ACL week 1, am I going to win my league because I then drafted Tyler Algier? No, I'm probably going to lose my league because my first round pick blew out his ACL. And Tyler Algier, as good as he is not going to replace what Bijan Robinson represented. So instead of drafting your own handcuff, you should draft other people's handcuffs. Because if their star running back goes down, not only will they want to trade for said handcuff, it also inherently increases your own win rate. Because let's say if I take Bijan Robinson, person behind me takes Christian McCaffrey, CMC misses 12 games next year, and I drafted Elijah Mitchell. You get the direct impact of having Elijah Mitchell on your roster with that pick, and the indirect impact that your league mates' win rate is now going down the toilet because their top running back went down. Last year, to give you an example of how this could have played out, the biggest handcuff that hit was Jamal Williams, right? I think, if you want to call him a handcuff, whatever the case is, he was a better pick than DeAndre Swift at face value. 13.5% was his win rate, 5.2% over expected. That was the highest of any handcuff, quote unquote, entering the season last year. So let's say you drafted a good early round running back last year like Nick Chubb, who had a 9.9% win rate, 1.5% over expected. He wasn't a smash pick, but he was a good pick. His win rate became lower if you handcuffed him with Kareem Hunt in the 9th round. Remember, this is best ball data, and this would even probably be worse in a managed league because Kareem Hunt's bench points count in a best ball league because he has spike weeks. They do not count for your roster in a managed league because he's probably not on the field in your lineup if Nick Chubb is healthy. However, if instead of taking Kareem Hunt in round 9 or wherever he was going, you took somebody else's handcuff, like Jamal Williams, where he was going last year, then your win rate jumped from 9.9% on just that Nick Chubb pick down to 8.7% if you drafted both Chubb and Hunt, to 16.2% if you drafted Nick Chubb and Jamal Williams. The home league playoff rate would have been, a top 6 percentage, would have been 75.7% just by drafting those two players, Nick Chubb and Jamal Williams, instead of 58.2% for just drafting Nick Chubb. So definitely something to keep in mind. I get the fascination with drafting your own handcuff. It definitely does protect you against injury. But again, we're playing a game of a 92nd percentile outcome. All of the money in my home league is at the top. You want to win the league to come down with all of that money. And if you are drafting to not come in last, then you're playing fantasy football wrong. You want to be drafting to come in first. And drafting to come in first means that you increase the upside of your team by drafting other people's handcuffs, not your own. So mistake number 6, drafting kickers and defenses before the last 2 rounds of your draft. This one's very simple. I don't play in any leagues with kickers and defenses anymore, but if you guys do, the variance of kicker and defense and also the ease of streaming these positions means that you should never draft them highly. The best way to handle kicker is to draft one late and draft a defense late. Draft them with the last 2 picks in your draft, or maybe don't draft one at all if you don't want to. You can bypass drafting that position and stream them on the waiver wire the second you actually have to make a lineup decision and put them into your lineup. Hold the handcuff for the rest of the preseason, and maybe the upside case plays out. All you have to do to stream kickers is target offenses that are good and target over-under games that are, good for fantasy point production. With defenses, all you have to do is target bad quarterbacks and target bad offenses who turn the ball over. It's really simple to handle these 2 positions. It makes them very replaceable in fantasy football. Is it nice to have Justin Tucker? Is it nice to have the Patriots defense? For sure. But if you're diligent and a committed fantasy manager, which I'm assuming if you're watching this video you are, it's extremely easy to stream these positions. So do not draft kickers and defenses, especially don't draft multiple, but definitely don't draft them highly. 14th and 15th round picks, if you're in a 15-round draft, should be earmarked for your kicker and for your defense. And one last bonus point before we get out of this video is I want to shout out drafting on your home league site. So if you guys are doing mock drafts and you're playing on Sleeper, you should be drafting on Sleeper to get an edge and understand where players go on Sleeper. And also, you should be drafting on Underdog Fantasy as well, because Underdog Fantasy is the sharpest ADP out there. By drafting on Underdog Fantasy, you'll start to recognize ADP values on sites like Sleeper, on sites like ESPN, Yahoo Fantasy, whatever site you're playing on. And right now, you can go to Underdog Fantasy and sign up using promo code FSE. They will match your first deposit up to $100. And by depositing just $10, you'll get access to our entire rankings draft guide. If you guys want the best tool to win your fantasy league, if you're just coming back to the football scene, this has everything that you need, and you can get it for free by depositing just $10 on Underdog Fantasy. If you already have an Underdog account, or if you're in an eligible state to play on Underdog Fantasy, you can get it also by going to flockfantasy.com and using the promo code FSE for 30% off any of the monthly packages, annual packages. If you you sign up annually right now, you can get a free Zoom consultation with myself. And also, our listener league drawing will be on Saturday. So if you want a chance to be in a league with myself and with Danny, you get 2 times the entries by signing up on Underdog using code FSE, signing up on the site using code FSE, and you also get 1 entry if you want to just enter 1 time by doing one of those 2 things. And like I said, you'll get our redraft guide for free. So that will all be linked down below in the pinned comment and in the description if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.